Good morning. My name is Marjorie Willicott, and I am one of the co-organizers of the Scientific and Medical Network's Beyond the Brain Conference for 2024. And Dr. Joan Borysenko, who is here with me today, has been invited to be one of our speakers at the conference on Sunday, November the 10th. And she will be sharing with us about the topic of her scientific and spiritual path. Joan, I understand that your vision for the past 50 years has been to bring together science, psychology, and spirituality in the service of both healing and peace. And you and I have somewhat parallel paths in our careers, in both starting out with PhDs and careers in medical fields, but shifting later to encompass mind-body medicine and spirituality as a passion in our lives. So perhaps we can begin by having you share briefly about your path as a scientist and a mystic and how it unfolded.
Yes, I know this about you already, Marjorie, and that is you were already a scientist when you had an experience that said, wow, things are larger than I thought. Science can't be all of it. I had exactly the opposite. What happened was when I was 10 years old, I developed a really serious case of obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, and they assumed I was having hallucinations, and I had a whole story. I had hallucinated headhunters breaking into my parents' house, and I could see them with blowguns and poison darts. I thought they were going to kill my parents and my brother. And what I did was to develop a whole set of repetitive behaviors, obsessive behaviors that I believed if I performed, the headhunters wouldn't hurt my family. So they were legion. For example, I couldn't just pick up something and read it. Oh no, I had to turn it upside down, read it upside down and backwards 3 times without being interrupted. Or I just dissolved in terror, screaming terror that because of me, my failure, my parents would die. Then there were simpler rituals, the typical hand washing that you see, and several others. To make a long story a little shorter, I couldn't really go to school. I missed days. I stayed in there, but missed days because how can you do a math test when you have to erase everything 3 times before you put the answer down? Then one day, I um, I hallucinated the headhunters down the hall, was hit in my fantasy by a poison dart, and my arm swelled up like this, hot, red, swollen. I go to the school nurse and say, quick, call an ambulance. I've been hit by a poison dart. Well, that gets you sent home in a hurry. And it was heartbreaking for my parents. We lived in Boston. There was, a good chance of finding an excellent psychiatrist. And they took me to a couple who had nothing to say. There weren't even any drugs, no Klonopin, no Prozac, because I'm almost 80. This was 70 years ago. No cognitive behavior therapy. And so I would hear my parents crying themselves to sleep at night, while when I went to sleep, had really the same repetitive nightmare over and over. And I didn't know what to do with myself. At 10, I was convinced that committing suicide would really be the best thing, because how could I live like that? The reason that I didn't is that there would be no one left to protect my family. So I stayed for that reason. Now, here came the spiritual experience, which was also a cure for the OCD. So In order to understand the spiritual experience, I have to go back a little bit, 2 years in time. I went to a camp in the summer. It was actually a Jewish girls' camp. And that to me was a deep spiritual experience. Just to be there on Friday night, the Sabbath would come. We would be down by a lake in a pine grove, so peaceful. And as the sun, before it set, as it's getting ready to set, we have a Sabbath service. So you have 150 little girls all dressed in Sabbath white. And then each bunk would take a part in the service each Friday night. And we would welcome the Sabbath Queen because the belief is that the Godhead is not male. It's male and female, and the interaction between that is what brings creation into existence. So we would honor the Sabbath Queen and sing a song. Let's see if I can sing a little bit of it without frightening our listeners off. You have to think of my voice 70 years ago. Just imagine it. And it was, "Come, O Sabbath day, and bring peace and healing on thy wing, and to every troubled breast speak of thy divine behest. Thou shalt rest, thou shalt rest." And you know how sometimes you hear a sound in your bones, it vibrates in your cells, and it becomes an experience. And the whole rest of the service would put me literally in this state of peace where my mind was completely still. And of course, when you're a kid, you don't notice that, oh, that's really a great state. That's kind of just how it is. However, now flash forward, there I am with OCD at 10 after a couple of years of summer camp. And it's probably March or April. And I start to think, I'm too sick to go back to camp. I'm not going to be able to go. And I was grieving that. And I picked up some of the songbooks and things from camp. And I remembered the peace. And I started to chant to myself, the chant to the Sabbath Queen and some of the prayers. And then suddenly I entered a completely different reality. Peace is wonderful. And then there are levels of reality, as you know. And in the level of reality I entered, I understood clearly how to recover from the OCD. Number one, I understood that if I ever did another ritual, something was going to change, like in my brain, and I would be stuck in this physical, mental, emotional place. And I realized I had work to do on earth. I couldn't stay stuck in this place. It was a terrible place. And what I had to do to be unstuck was bring myself back to that center of peace. And I had a special way of doing that because after I had had this terrible experience of no peace in the state I was in, there was light. I saw light. I felt light. And a poem came to my mind, which I called The Light. And the poem goes, somewhere in the darkest night, there always shines a little light. Remember, I'm 10. Somewhere in the darkest night, there always shines a little light. This light up in the heavens shines to help our God watch over us. When a small child is born, the light her soul does adorn. So when our only human eyes look up in the lightless sky, we must know, even though we cannot see, that this light shines bright to help our God watch over us. And I understood, okay, see the headhunters, no rituals. Say the poem and it will bring you back to this space. And I'll tell you, the first day or two were hard. I really had to be brave because I was still scared by those headhunters. But I would just shut my eyes and go back to the poem, back to the poem. And 3 or 4 days later, that was it. No more headhunters, no more OCD. And you know, my parents never asked me what happened, sort of like just last week. You were a wreck. What happened? I think they were too afraid to upset the apple cart.
Yeah.
It was never mentioned again until shortly before my mother died, and that's when I was about 40. Oh,
Wow. Well, now, did that then begin a shift toward wanting to look at
yes.
healing, et cetera? Tell me.
You're going to love this because I was in the 5th grade and my
Yes.
favorite course was science.
Hey.
And we were studying the brain.
Yeah.
So, so my immediate question was, what could go on in a brain that all of a sudden you're in this desperately difficult, horrible, I didn't use the word, but basically hell space.
Yeah.
And and then I think I thought to myself, what a lot of kids who get sick think to themselves, I'm going to grow up to be a doctor or a nurse and, help other people who are sick like I was. And who knew? I mean, I knew about psychiatry, sort of, not much. I knew you went there when you were mentally troubled, but and then I knew there was a field of psychology, and that's what I wanted to do. And so that was kind of it for me.
That's wonderful,
The,
Joan.
the science, the psychology, the spirituality, like dropped in at 10. And of course, it grew from there naturally. And, the understanding of what happened to me and being able to contextualize it took many, many years. But that was the beginning of the path.
That's so exciting to me. I mean, partly because sometimes we think children are too innocent or young to have those amazing experiences that literally transform their entire life and turn it into something else and heal. As you said, it healed you. So, I mean, that's a fascinating thing about our own, I want to say our own connection with the absolute, that there is that power through that prayer, the song that you were doing, et cetera, that it literally could transform everything that had been going on for all that time. I mean, it's a beautiful story. And I want to say, because we don't have a lot of time in this short interview, that I think it'll be fun to get together on November the 10th and begin to explore, for example, life itself and illness, health, life, death. What does it all mean when we begin to have an understanding that consciousness is fundamental and consciousness is not just a product of the human brain, and consciousness is something that allows us to communicate even beyond words with other people and with plants and animals and things like that. So I love the fact that we're both scientists and we both have another understanding that consciousness is way more than we thought it was when we were just young people beginning to learn from our neuroscience professors in school. So I think it would be great to do that. So what I want to say is to thank you for this interview today, and also to invite everyone that's listening to this to listen to our upcoming Beyond the Brain conference. It's November 8th through the 10th, and to hear Joan's thoughts on these topics and also on, for example, shared death experiences. She will share with us the story of her mother's dying and how she shared that with her, as well as, of course, you'll hear presentations from a number of other leaders in the field. And you can, of course, register at the Scientific and Medical Network website. So I thank you for being with us today, Joan, and I look forward to our talking together in just a few more weeks.
Absolutely. Marjorie, thanks for doing the work that you do. And I'm excited. I cannot wait to compare and think about, where we've been and what we have experienced.
Thank you.